Revolutions Per Minute is a weekly radio show from the New York City chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. Recorded live at WBAI 99.5 in Brooklyn every Wednesday at 9 p.m. RPM's about doing the work to build a democratic socialist future. Each week, hear the latest news, analysis, and organizing experience from the minds and hearts of activists fighting every day in New York City. Join the movement at socialists.nyc.
Hey, what's up, New York City? It's Amy Wilson. You're listening to Revolutions Per Minute live on WBAI. We are a socialist radio show and podcast from members of New York City's Democratic Socialists of America. The Democratic Socialists of America is the largest socialist organization in the United States with 90,000 members nationwide. New York-DSA is its biggest chapter. We are run by our 7,000 plus members and organizers who are working together to build democratic socialism in all 5 boroughs. Once again, my name is Amy Wilson. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a member of North Brooklyn DSA. Tonight's show is a little bit different, but will be a ton of fun. We're taking a break from our usual format to give you a glimpse into the Revolutions Per Minute team behind the scenes, who we are, why we volunteer to produce a weekly radio show for New York-DSA, and why we support WBAI. We always appreciate donations in the name of Revolutions Per Minute, but tonight we have a special thank you for those who give during this show, so do not touch that dial. We have several members of our production crew live in the studio tonight, so now I'll give everyone a chance to say hello.
Hey everybody, I'm Lee Zishi. I am one of the hosts and producers of RPM. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm joining you tonight from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, which is occupied Canarsie, Muncie, Lenape land, and I'm very excited to be with the rest of the crew tonight.
Hi everyone, my name is Desiree Frias. I use she, her pronouns. I'm talking to you from the South Bronx, New York, and I'm so excited to join you all tonight.
Yo, what's good, everybody? It's Jack Devine. I'm back on the air after a couple of months off, and I am very excited to be back. And I'm coming from Park Slope. Just got back from a Central Brooklyn branch meeting.
Hey everyone, it's Bernard Goyder here. I'm coming to you live from Harlem, and really happy to be here. I'm a new member of the RPM team, and hope you enjoy the show.
Hey, this is Rob Granis. I'm coming from Kensington, Brooklyn. I use he, him, and just thank you for tuning in.
We'll hear more from all these awesome comrades throughout tonight's show, but first, let's hear the headlines live with Bernard Goyder.
So, federal COVID unemployment benefits are set to expire at the end of the week, potentially cutting off crucial support to New Yorkers as the city continues to battle the COVID-19 pandemic. NYC public schools issued a full COVID vaccine mandate for all the DOV staff without an alternative such as weekly testing. The mandate came just as the US Food and Drug Administration gave full approval to Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine. More than 1,500 classrooms still require ventilation repairs as NYC schools prepare to reopen. Union leaders representing CUNY faculty and staff demanded improved COVID protocols and transparency as the university system resumes in-person instruction for the fall semester. Governor Kathy Hochul appointed State Senator Brian Benjamin of Harlem as Lieutenant Governor. Before leaving office, Governor Cuomo granted clemency to 5 incarcerated men, including David Gilbert, a former member of the Weather Underground and a father of San Francisco's DA Chesa Boudin. Why is East Harlem 31 degrees hotter than Central Park West? A citizen science project is mapping out heat inequality in New York City, which is dependent on other patterns of inequality such as race, income, air quality, and access to air conditioning. A wave of violence and staffing shortages have plagued Rikers Island this summer, according to a federal monitor appointed to oversee the city's jails. Barney, the 1,500-pound runaway Long Island bull, is still on the lam. And in elections news, ranked choice voting likely changed the results of only 3 of the 63 elections held across the city during the primary season. In the other 60 elections, the top first choice vote getter was victorious. Republicans are defending one of the 3 city council seats they currently hold, and the only one in Queens in what could be a close general election race in District 32.
Great. Thank you so much, Bernard, for the wonderful headlines. You can read those anytime at thethorn.nyc, which is an incredible weekly newsletter by New York City-DSA Electoral Working Group. It covers local politics and radical activism. Again, you can subscribe at thethorn.nyc. So my name again is Desiree Joy Frias. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently on the organizing committee of the Bronx Upper Manhattan branch. I am here with your first pitch. So today is our fundraising extravaganza, and I want to talk to you a little bit about why I volunteer with RPM. So the forces of capitalism operate on the belief that the working class will take whatever's offered. Unlivable wages and working conditions, the exploitation of our migrant neighbors, the destruction of our planet. That they can just evict us, jail us, union bust us, silence us in a million ways. But then DSA organizers across the country show up to the fight. The Preschool for All ballot measure in Portland, housing rights in Houston, India Walton in Buffalo, and the Teamsters strike right here in Hunts Point. When DSA shows up, we win. DSA is the organization that will bring socialism in my lifetime. And Revolutions Per Minute is the voice of that movement. It records the stories of our victories, the bitter tears of our struggles. It empowers organizers by platforming their experiences, and it breathes new life into our comrades when we're tired and frustrated with the pace of progress. It reminds us that even when we can't join every single fight, our comrades are right there doing the work as well. For over 3 years, WBAI 99.5 FM has been our home, and it's time to tend to our garden. Live radio is one of the last bastions of free speech, and I don't mean that in a hyperbolic way. With conglomerations like Sinclair Media eating up local television networks, we the people must keep our platforms funded and thriving so that our stories and the stories of our children have a place to be told without influence from the ruling class. So, we have a limited number of For the Many, Not the Money collectible DSA for Bernie shirts for our listeners tonight. They're available for a donation of $65 to support locally made community radio. Please call 212-209-2950. Again, that phone number is 212-209-2950. Or you can go to give2wbai.org. Again, that website is give2wbai.org. So I hope that you can give and help keep radio programs like RPM on the radio, free from influence by the ruling class. And the t-shirts, they're so cool. They're union made, they're super soft, and, you know, they're collectibles. Campaign merch, they always go up in value. You know, if you look on Mercari, you can get buttons from campaigns that were 60 years ago. They're over $100. So imagine how much this t-shirt from such a pivotal campaign in the socialist movement will be worth in 30 years. So that's my pitch, and thank you so much to the team for having me on.
Well, Desiree, that was a really great pitch. I don't know if we'll be able to top it the rest of the show, but we'll all give it a try. But I think I'm going to start this off for a little bit of a different show with this sort of question that we ask our guests all the time, and we kind of dive into a little bit, which is what got us involved in the socialist movement, and for many of us, what got us involved in organizing with Revolutions Per Minute, where we're talking so much about the struggles that everyone in the movement is involved in New York City and across the country. So maybe I'll throw that to Amy first.
The question is, what got me involved with Revolutions Per Minute specifically, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to stretch it back to the movement in general, feel free. I would love. I'm going to tell maybe a little bit different version of the story that I've told before at the end of this, but I want to hear everyone else's.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I would love to speak a little bit about, I've spoken a little bit about my history as a socialist organizer and an anti-fascist and abortion access advocate. But tonight I'd actually love to speak about my history with radio specifically, because I really super love radio. I am one of the few, the proud, the radio nerds. And my radio experience is mostly not political. Before being here on WBAI, little under 10 years ago, I was doing the 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift on my local community radio station in Southeast Michigan. And that's really what I attribute my current state of mind and personality to. It was a formative experience. It broke my brain in a really real way, but it also exposed me to the fact that radio connects you to people no matter what time and no matter where you are. So even on the 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift, I would have calls. People were driving, overnight truckers, people who were up with sick kids or taking care of others or who also worked weird hours. So it really showed me that radio is a great way to reach out and touch people, which is why I really appreciate what you just said, Desiree, about the way this show particularly can provide that sense of connection to other parts of the movement. Even when I listen to it, I remember even if I'm not able to be involved with a certain struggle, there are other people who are, and it gives me a really strong sense of sort of the unity of our, I guess, human nature. I don't know if that's too lofty, but that's really how I feel. And can I popcorn it? Can I be a cheesy socialist and popcorn it to somebody else, Jack?
Go right ahead.
All right. I'd love to hear from our comrade Rob about his journey into DSA or radio or however you'd like to interpret the question.
Yeah, sure. I got involved in radio right after Katrina. I was living in New Orleans for about 8 years and worked with a couple of funk bands, and the drummer for a funk band actually helped me get a job after the storm and after relocating to New York in Air America, and was on the morning shift there. And I feel you, Amy, about like 6 a.m. and like not knowing who's out there listening, but like, you know, it connected with somebody. And a little brief stint there and WNYC for a few years. And I guess, you know, in 2016, I joined DSA like a lot of people. When it exploded in terms of like its visibility, some friends, comrades got me interested in it, and it seemed like where the energy was and where to put my time and my, you know, some effort into it. And kind of dropped off. Not great at meetings and all of that, but and then I because I had a media production background, I did a little bit of work with Rose Radio, and started with that. Kind of fizzled out, but and then I saw an email from you guys, and I put it out there that I can take some editing on, and I've been glad to hear it, and I'm glad I'm a part of it. And I guess I don't know the term popcorn, but I guess I can throw it out to Bernard.
Sure. Yeah. Very, very happy to jump in there. So I'm a professional journalist, but I'm not used to this medium. It's a new medium for me. So my bread and butter is writing stuff and putting stuff on the internet. And also, you know, I'm a news journalist, so I never really tend to put myself and my politics front and center. But I think with a show like this, that's very much, it's really great to see people wear their colors on their sleeve. And, you know, I certainly know where I stand. I'm a member of one of the largest democratic socialist organizations in America, DSA, but I'm also a member of one of the largest democratic socialist parties in Europe, which is the Labour Party, and sadly been taken over by forces which are pretty reactionary and conservative. But it's different to the Democrats. It's constitutionally a socialist party, and you know, I'm proud of that. Those institutional links to the labor movement that the Democrats in the United States don't really have in quite the same way. So that kind of informs my perspective and my politics. But I'd be happy to throw it back to Jack.
Well, let me give it to Desiree first. I'm gonna kind of lead into my pitch. So let's go to Desiree, and then maybe Lee, and then I'll close it out.
All right, I'm going to give the phone number to give again, just one more time before I go into my backstory. So that phone number is 212-209-2950. Again, 212-209-2950 to keep our stories on the air. So I joined DSA after the Bernie bump. I was really moved by how he spoke to my experience as a woman of color growing up poor in the South Bronx. And I really understood that socialism was the only way out of this hole that we're in. And I think that organizing with DSA has really made me not just a better organizer, but a better person. And RPM is such a big part of that. Being able to hear the struggles and the hardships that my comrades are going through while they're fighting for change. If it's, Sia and Dennis talking about housing justice, talking to now city councilwoman Tiffany Caban about queer pride, and talking to an elected politician in New York City office about being gay. I mean, that's not something that our parents necessarily would have had the opportunity to do. And I think it's so part of what I get out of RPM is documenting the fact that, yes, there's so much suffering. Yes, there's so much going wrong, but things are changing, and they're changing for the better. And it's because of the work of my comrades in DSA. So that's why I joined RPM. That's why I stick around. And yeah, it's a ton of work. It's not easy. And people like Amy do so much of the heavy lifting. But it's so worth it. And I encourage all DSA members that are listening to come and join us as well, because it's a fun group. And I'll pass it on to Lee to tell her organizing story.
Yeah, I actually went to college to be a journalist, do TV and radio, and I produced some really great stories in college. I did this one where I went to the Stark post office with this woman to pick up little baby turkey poults that she was going to raise to sell on Thanksgiving, and it just amazing sound. But I ended up organizing, and I kind of thought of this while you were reading the headlines, kind of because of a buffalo head. I interned at NBC Miami in between my junior and senior year of college, and I followed this investigative reporter, and it was the summer of the BP oil spill. And I remember at one point they sent him down to the Keys to interview this guy who had come home really drunk, and he had a stuffed buffalo head on the wall, and it fell off the wall and pinned him to a chair. And it was just kind of one of those weird viral stories, but there's all these important things happening in the world, and they sent this reporter to talk to this man who did not want to be talked to. And I was like, is this going to be my life? Am I going to be reporting on buffalo heads? And they were they wanted this corner that smelled like weed, and there was unrest in Jamaica. And so I ended up organizing instead. I worked for a documentary about fracking, and once you start learning about fracking, you definitely start hating capitalism, because you really see how people are just being completely destroyed and exploited for profits. And, within my organizing, I do kind of love storytelling, and that's what I like most being an organizer. And yeah, I saw on an Instagram post that DSA was starting a radio show, and I was just so excited, because I sometimes wish I could go back more into journalism, and there wasn't so much organizing that needs to be done. And it's just been such a joy to talk to comrades from all over the country, and work with you all. You're all just such an amazing crew, and I've loved what we've been doing over the last couple of years.
These are all such great stories to hear, and I've told a different story, before on the air, one that's very true, about how I've gotten involved in the movement, seeing the increase in movement struggles throughout the 2010s, and how important that was to getting DSA out in the open. But I got married two and a half weeks ago. So I've spent a lot of the past couple months thinking about family, and why this struggle is so personal to me. The struggle for socialism, and having working class institutions like WBAI and having democratically run organizations, because my family has been fighting back against capitalist imperialism for centuries. They in Ireland, where they came to kick us off, the farms where we worked, where we fought back and built organization and preserved as much as we could, prevented the violence against women that they unleashed as much as we could. And the same thing for my family that comes from Russia, where the aristocracy came after us, and people organized and fought back, and they either stayed there and they helped in the revolution, or they came here and they fought to build working class organization. And it's here in New York, in the Bronx, there was a lot of fights to not just build the union movement, and that was hard struggle during the New Deal and fight the Popular Front, but also in the aftermath of the New Deal, that the mafia came for the unions, and organizers worked and fought to maintain working class organization here. And then people in my family fought for civil rights with SDS. And this has been a long struggle for my family that continues in the union movement today, not just with me, but with my large extended family, and many of whom are big supporters of WBAI. And this is the sort of institution, this media institution, that we can actually have to come out and talk about these sort of things, have people's stories that you don't hear on corporate media, the history of the movement and the struggle that is so, so crucial to anything that we have, the limited social democracy that we have, the unions that make sure that people have a living in this city that is better than places in the country where there are such limited working class organization. And so it's so crucial to recognize the history of struggle and the need for places like WBAI, media institutions, because the reality is that capitalist media doesn't just spread propaganda about politics on the big level, but capitalist media targets beautiful people. It exacerbates mental diseases. It destroys beautiful people. And we need media that uplifts and centers humanity. And the struggle for socialism is ultimately a struggle for love, because for socialists, love is power. And so for me, this is what is core to my fight. And so I think it's not just about, the big things we talk about, and there's a lot of fun, but we're fighting for our lives here, and we're fighting for a good life for everybody and give everybody the chance to be with the people they love and enjoy life. And WBAI is a place that can spread that message to millions of people. So I would really, really encourage you to go to WBAI.org/donate, give $25. You become a member of this democratic working class organization where you vote for people on the local station board, people on the local station board. We have SAG here. SAG is a great union that fights working people across the country. And so we need to be fighting for working class organizations, because that's how we build a better world, democratic working class organizations, because we're fighting for our lives here. So either do that, go to give to WBAI.org. That's give number 2 to WBAI.org, or call 212-209-2950. And so I'm just going to pass it over to Lee for the next segment.
Yeah, we're going to continue to, get to know our crew a little bit better, so you understand who are the people who are, volunteers and bringing this to you. So before I pitch this to you guys, I want to add a little bit to some of my backstory. So before, the first kind of reporter that I actually wanted to be was a sports reporter, because I'm from Pittsburgh and I was in love with Hines Ward, and I wanted to meet and marry Hines Ward. And if you don't know who Hines Ward is, he was a wide receiver who was known for blocking very well, and he won a bunch of Super Bowls. Anyway, so I wanted to be a sports reporter first, and on a call recently that I was on, we did an icebreaker question where it was, if you could have like any Jeopardy category, what would you choose? And I literally, besides fracking these days, don't have any like really specific knowledge besides like the 2000 Steelers. Like when I was in like high school and a little bit of college, I actually stopped watching because our quarterback for the Steelers is a rapist and I will not watch him. But so I don't watch, but so I have this very like a decade of Steeler knowledge. And I was like, so if I could do like a show on just one topic, that's like what besides fracking it would be that. But I know a lot of you have some very specific labor knowledge and some other knowledge. So I am going to go to you first, Amy. If you could do a show on just like one very specific thing or something that you don't think is covered a lot, what would you do?
So thank you, Lee, for that, and for giving us that background on yourself. I am a Jeopardy champion. Many people don't know this about me, but I was actually on Jeopardy in 2010 and I won. So this is a little bit of an unfair question. And do I spend my life waiting for an opportunity to tell people this? Yes. Yes, I do. So that's a little bit of a fact about Amy Wilson. I would love to do a whole radio show, and if there is one on WBAI, I'm not aware of it. So I do apologize if I'm about to offend anybody right now. But I would love to do a radio show about Motown specifically, and the history of Motown and African American music and how that relates to industry and the history of Detroit as well, because that was actually my first introduction to radio. When I was a kid, I would listen to our local station, KISN. I'm from the West Coast, KISN 97.1 FM, which was our oldies station. So I could easily do a whole series on that. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share that Amy Wilson fun fact.
I totally forgot that about you, but I'm so glad that I thought of Jeopardy. So that every time now when people listen to RPM, they're like, oh, that's smart Amy Wilson. She's a Jeopardy queen. What about you, Desiree? What could you do a whole show on?
Oh man, I don't know. I guess I'm not very good at trivia. But yeah, I mean, I guess it would be like, something that I went to school for, boring like that, which would be, public health.
So what you do shows on already a lot.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I guess I don't have that wide amount of trivia knowledge necessary to play Jeopardy like Amy does. And I'm officially looking up your old episode and watching it because that's so great. I do really love that show. But Rob, do you have a specialized group of knowledge?
I was into the sort of two oddest things. When I lived in New Orleans, I was producing music. I was engineering in a studio. And instead of being like sort of I had worked with some jazz and funk bands, but like mostly I worked with like a lot of metal scene. And I really wanted to break into like industrial music because that's how I got interested in sound engineering, was Nine Inch Nails and Ministry. I just kind of worshipped them in high school. So I guess if I was ever going to do a lecture or radio show, I mean, I would center it around like industrial music mostly. I do have a pretty good metal, and particularly black metal, and sort of the more extreme like mathcore, and I'm sorry, I've got these Amber alerts going off or emergency storm alerts going on, and I just got distracted for a second. Anyway, yeah, and actually industrial music kind of ties into like, that was sort of my first real confronting capitalism. It was just like KMFDM and all of those like sort of production pop subversions, like bands, Skinny Puppy did a lot of anti-animal abuse. Their name is derived from it, and like a lot of their music videos and everything was just confronting that horror of like the industry of like makeup production and meat production, and I think they're vegans or vegetarians. Actually, weirdly, same with the metal scene. There was a band called Cattle Decapitation who they're like grindcore vegetarians, and it's very brutal music, but they're, you know, very focused on sort of exposing those horrors. And yeah, so I think I would do a show on that, probably because I don't know much else.
So now our listening audience knows we're not just a bunch of organizing, socialist-loving nerds. You know, we have very breadth of knowledge and experience here. And you're not going to find this on a lot of other channels. Most channels don't give organizers a free space. So if you appreciate this, you know, WBAI cannot do this without our listeners. So you can call 212-209-2950. Remember, if you donate $65, you'll get that amazing Bernie shirt. It's 212-209-2950, or you can go to WBAI.org. Yeah, and as Rob said, you know, right now we're getting alerts as a hurricane, you know, the remains of a hurricane is coming through New York. We've seen flooding all summer. And that's something that we've covered on WBAI, you know, from the very beginning. The very first show that I produced for RPM covered things like a Green New Deal. And we had Alexandra Villasenor on, who at the time I think was 15 or 16. And she ended up, you know, becoming pretty well known with the youth strikes that were going on. I saw her being interviewed by CNN when there was that massive march that happened when Greta Thunberg was in town. But she had her very first interview here on RPM. Her mom told me that we were her first interview. We've also covered a lot. You know, last summer we had comrades from Southwest Louisiana on when Laura and other hurricanes slammed the Gulf Coast again and again. And what we really focused on, you know, wasn't just the disaster, it was the organizing. And for me, I think that's the most important part about RPM. You know, it's very easy to despair in the face of climate organizing. Like, I face that every single day. Like, how do I get out of bed and fight another pipeline? But it's because people are doing organizing. And, you know, as an organizer who also does a lot of media work, I can guarantee you that a lot of shows don't cover organizing. And so I hope people understand how important that is in a radio show, not just to tell you about the horrible things that are happening in the world, but deeply understand these campaigns and how we run them, how DSA runs campaigns, how there's a role for everybody, how we build power not just to have one specific victory, but organize long term. And I can just guarantee you there are not other stations like that. I do a lot of interviews in my job, and this is it. This is the real deal, and this is what's going to get us through another awful summer of climate change. So please, please keep us on the air. Again, that number is 212-209-2957. That's 212-209-2950. We appreciate you all so, so much.
Thank you, Lee. And I hope that you can all get on to Give. And again, you got that phone number from Lee. There's also a website, Give, the number 2, WBAI.org. Again, that website is Give, the number 2, WBAI.org. So we talked about a little bit about trivia that people know a lot about. And Amy and I were talking about this a couple weeks ago, but obviously RPM is kind of centered around organizers, but if it was open to anybody, alive or dead, who would be your dream interview? And I guess I'll start with Amy. If you could interview anybody.
No. Go to Jack. I want to hear Jack's answer.
Jack?
Well, I would have to say, to continue on the theme, I would love to be able to interview my grandpa who passed away 15 years ago. He was, he not only was he a fighter in the movement for working people, but he was a hilarious character who loved to roam around and yell things like, "Look at all the frogs," when he was driving around in his old Volvo car and make jokes and come down and do very, very funny things. So he's definitely my dream interview. And we could also we could commiserate, talking about trivia from before. A thing I could talk about in the air all day is all the miserable sports fan moments that many New York baseball fans who are not Yankees fans have together. So let me throw that over to Amy.
And I'm going to bounce it right back to Bernard because I want to make you all wait for this answer.
Yeah, it's such a hard question. I mean, I think it's going to be very difficult to beat Jack's answer, but I mean, I think it would be amazing to interview like Rosa Luxemburg, or like one of those amazing leftists who amazing leftist women who transform society, like even like Mary Shelley or something like that. There are lots of an amazing woman in history who wrote something really powerful. I think that would be the kind of person I'd want to interview, but I don't know. I need to think about it more.
Yeah, that was a good answer. I mean, obviously, any of the greats would be. It's wild to think that people got to live alongside them and organize alongside them, and then they're in the history books. But we'll go over to Rob. Do you have anyone you would want to interview?
Actually, my partner Judy's grandmother was a very incredible woman and sort of the strain of Luxembourg. Bessie Shatsky was a communist organizer who left Russia weirdly, like right in the the spring of like 1917, and came to New York and was in charge of the education program. She was president of the educational committee, and her husband was vice president. And I would just love to pick her brain on what organizing was back then. And I mean, it's just an incredible story. She had to like keep it low key, and her son, Judy's father, didn't even find out until in his like 20s, but just because like the fear was there that if you were outed as an organizer and as a communist, you would be blacklisted, you wouldn't be able to work, you probably end up in jail. I'd also love to FOIA records, because I'm sure that there's a good amount of information about her under her probably real name, as well as I think actually she was in the Bronx, so I think like she wrote under the name Halsey. I think there was a street or something like that which was used commonly amongst those people. But yeah, just like amazing women who changed history. Bessie, just anytime I hear stories about her from my partner, I get really inspired.
Well, I love that everybody, or several of the answers here, have been what you might call regular people. Jack's grandfather, Robert's partner's grandmother, because that would be my answer to the question. And this was the answer that I gave when I was asked, is my dream guest is all 7,000 members and organizers of New York City-DSA. And I won't stop until I've interviewed all of them. And I hope that number keeps growing. And I do think it's remarkable that here on Revolutions Per Minute, we are able to interview folks who are, you might consider to be regular people, alongside folks like the historical figures Bernard named, right? So we're talking about Rosa Luxemburg and Mary Shelley and other names that are known to history. But just a couple weeks ago, we had Julia Salazar, who was the first socialist legislator elected in New York State in nearly 100 years when she came to office in 2018. And if that's not a historic event, if that's not something that people are going to be reading about in history books, I hope in the future, I don't know what is. And it's pretty incredible when we do have our comrades who are socialist electeds on the show, and just how real they're able to be with us and how comfortable they are speaking to members of their own organization, which I think is something that's pretty notable, and something that I'll always remember is interviewing our comrade or watching Jack interview our comrade Brandon West back in the spring of this year when he was running for city council. And as soon as we closed the show, he said, "Oh, this was fun. This was like hanging out with family." And that's really what I want Revolutions Per Minute to feel like for not only the people who make it, but also the people who listen to it. When you listen to it, I want you to know that this is something that you can be part of, whether you're already a member of New York City-DSA, whether you organize somewhere else in your own union, in your neighborhood, wherever it may be, or whether you're still looking for a political home and maybe thinking that maybe that could be New York City-DSA. And you know what's a great way to find a political home? It's to wear your heart on your sleeve or on your chest, as the case may be, in a union-made, for the many, not the money, Bernie Sanders t-shirt, which could be yours for a donation of only $65 to Revolutions Per Minute tonight. How would you get that Bernie shirt? It's super easy. You could just call 212-209-2950. That's 212-209-2950. Or if you're an online millennial, you could go to give2WBAI.org. We do only have a limited number of these Bernie shirts to give away tonight, so don't hesitate. Call 212-209-2950, 212-209-2950, or go to give2WBAI.org. I am fortunate enough to already have one of the Bernie shirts, and I will say that when I wear it, people do make comments or give me sort of a "we're in a secret club together" look. So it is a great way to declare your politics as you walk around in the world and let other people know that they're not alone, that there are socialists walking among us, there are anti-fascists walking among us, there are communists walking among us, anarchists among us on the streets of New York City or wherever you may be. So you don't want to miss out on the chance to get one of these Bernie shirts. Like I said, we only have a limited number. They are union made, of course. So I'll just read that number one more time, just in case you missed it. 212-209-2950. That's 212-209-2950.
Thank you, Amy. And I guess I'll go ahead and give my interview goal. So even though he is a documented racist and an evil person that completely changed the landscape of the Bronx, I want to interview Robert Moses, but that's just because, I've got a bone to pick. I was born and raised in the South Bronx, which has one of the highest incidences of asthma in the United States, and it's mostly due to a lot of the restructuring and public planning done by what seemed like a normal government employee named Robert Moses. But he ended up being so powerful that his biography is actually called The Power Broker. And he tore up the Bronx and put this giant Cross Bronx Expressway, basically a suburban-sized highway, in the middle of one of New York's largest boroughs, and it caused a lot of environmental harm. It evicted people of color from their houses. And it was all with the goal of providing a faster means of transit for white rich elite from Manhattan to their homes in Westchester, and to the beach, which he created, Orchard Beach, for them to party at. So, it'd be a very heated interview, but I think that he never had the opportunity because of the time he lived in to answer for the harms he caused. And I think that journalism can also have the opportunity to push back on people that are doing harm. Like when Lee interviews people about fracking and the harm that's currently being done to North Brooklyn with the pipeline, and that kind of hard-hitting interviews needs to have a home, and WBAI is that home. So please give. And again, it's 212-209-2950. That phone number is 212-209-2950. And I'm going to pass it back to Jack.
Well, everyone gave a lot of great stories about their dream interview, and I'm happy that Desiree wants to be hard-hitting on Robert Moses. But we're coming to the end of the show, and I just want to open up the phone line so we can hear directly from you at 209-2877. Again, that number is 212-209-2877. So I'd love to, hear about why you support WBAI. Why do you listen to Revolutions Per Minute? What brings you to this radio station? Why are you drawn to the sort of things that we talk about here, about the struggle for socialism, the organizing that's happening on the ground, what DSA and other organizations, working class organizations, are up to. But while we're waiting for people to call in, I'd love to hear more from the comrades who have joined us this summer. So, Rob, you've been working on projects behind the scenes. You've been discussing this throughout the show a little bit, but why is community radio such an important thing to you?
WBAI just it's there. It's on the dial, and I mean I tuned into Democracy Now! Quite a bit when Katrina happened, because I couldn't get actually good information anywhere else. I would watch, the news channels, and then I would speak to friends on the ground, and the disparity was just huge. And it's like, it really clarified what mainstream type of news and media was, and how different it was to actually speak to people who were trying to organize on the ground, or people that were actually experiencing things that were not in, Anderson Cooper's orbit or whatever. It's just, it brings it home. And it was always just, a companion to me, and I owe them a lot too for the closest thing to journalism I ever did with WNYC, where they didn't have anybody down in Zuccotti Park the night it was cleared, but WBAI did, and I was recording that along with live streams, and that all ended up the next day on WNYC. We owe a lot of credit to this station in terms of just that coverage, and I caught it because people were complaining about it on Twitter, and it was funny. About 2 weeks later, we all got this bulk email that was all right, these two idiot engineers broke a story because they were paying attention on Twitter. You guys have to, spend more time on Twitter, basically. There was already accounts, but all of the journalists needed to start up that stuff. And, it was so all of the brain poisoning that happened to that news station, I helped start that by listening to WBAI and stealing audio from them and broadcasting it on them on other stations. So as penance, right now I'm going to www.wbai, what is the give to WBAI.org. So get on there, give the number 2, WBAI.org, and do what I'm doing. You owe it to them. You owe it to your community. You owe it to your comrades on RPM. So let me throw it back, since I probably am tapering off at this point.
No, that is a great story, Rob, and a great pitch. We're for the people, WBAI. So there's a little bit of a sharing of the sound, but you got to give back. And I think what you're really hitting on there is that BAI is there when capitalist media is not, when it's ignoring struggles on the ground. It's bringing the voices, and Pacifica Radio in general. For a long time, and BAI in particular, dating back to the 60s, has been sharing the voices of leaders in the civil rights struggle, in the struggle for Black power, the struggle for labor, the struggle for socialism, the struggle against. You don't hear the sort of stories of what the Vietnam coverage that happened back in the day. You didn't really see that going on. The kind of perspective that you would get here, and what you're getting every day now, having an organization like us, the DSA, NYC-DSA, but DSA that's syndicated nationally sometimes, getting onto the radio, and a socialist organization, working class organization, talking about struggle and kind of letting people know that you can organize in your workplace, in your community, in your you're building, and you can fight back, and you can build power. So, and you can build organization, and you can run the world. So it looks like we have a call, but I don't. So I would like to let the listener know that you are live on WBAI 99.5 FM. What's your name and what's your comment or question?
Hi, this is Reggie in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and I do like your show. I'm a member. I'd like in the future that you all are able to discuss electorally the voter turnout in not just primaries here. I think a prime example is the race in Ohio where Nina Turner was running, and she should have won that easily, I think. But I mean, even with that race, I believe that race of the registered voters that were registered, it was like 19% that actually turned out, and wasn't the overall turnout of voters that actually showed up in the New York City primaries is 27%. I mean, just being able to organize that other 70%. I mean, a candidate that would have got, some of those people that didn't show up in the primary would have easily won. So I would just like more of a analysis of that. I mean, to me, in the Nina Turner case, a lot of times of being slightly internationalist can actually hurt you, and I think that was the case of that with the last-minute dark money. But I mean, here even you all had Michael Hollingsworth. I mean, I mean, shouldn't someone like him have won that race? So I mean, I just wanted to throw that question out there. But I'm on your side, and I'm a WBAI member, and you all are doing a good job.
Thank you so much, Reggie, for calling. You should have seen us. We all were touching our headphones and leaning into the sound because you're a little bit faint. So I hope that the listeners were able to hear your comment, but I'll summarize it briefly just in case. Reggie was saying that Reggie thinks that voter turnout is a big issue, and engagement in electoral politics itself is a big issue, and we completely agree. We actually did cover that a couple of weeks ago. We covered the voting rights hearings that were being held in the state Senate. We heard testimony from Jasmine Cordero, who is a member of DSA in our Bronx Upper Manhattan branch. And I think that's really what the socialist movement presents. That's a really exciting possibility, is a way of engaging in politics that goes around and beyond electoral politics. So it's sort of this chestnut that young people don't vote, and I've been hearing that for my entire conscious life. And I remember efforts in the 2004 election, the 2008 election, 2012, rock the vote, all this cheesy stuff. And it's like, well, it doesn't take cheesy stuff. It takes engaging people on the issues that matter to them. It takes talking to working class people. It takes talking to people in their homes. And it takes removing barriers to vote. And I think that's something that we always have to keep in mind when we're talking about low voter turnout, is we still have felon disenfranchisement. People don't get a day off for voting. Voting restrictions can be hard and alienating if English isn't your first language, but you're eligible to vote. So I think all of those are interventions that we should look at before we start doing the Hillary Clinton Pokemon Go to the polls cheesy thing. I think there are definitely material solutions that we could try first. And speaking of material solutions, that is what we always try to do here on Revolutions Per Minute, what we always try to discuss, as you've heard throughout tonight's show with our crew of wonderful organizers, some who you've heard from before, some who are new voices and faces for you. And we are doing a fun fundraiser tonight. So I'll just recap what you can get if you give to WBAI in our name tonight. The number to call to do that is 212-209-2950. That's 212-209-2950, or go to WBAI.org. We have a limited number of these union-made, for the many, not the money, Bernie Sanders t-shirts. Those are available for a $65 donation to WBAI. For a $25 donation, you become a voting member of WBAI, and you can vote for listener representatives on the local station board. There are a couple of DSA members who are serving on the board right now, helping with governance of the station, and you can make your voice heard by giving $25 and participating in that station democracy. Or if you prefer to give a little bit monthly, maybe give us what you'd be giving to National Grid instead of giving it to them to build a racist frack gas pipeline through my neighborhood in North Brooklyn. Give it to Revolutions Per Minute, and I would say we'll give you a big hug and a kiss, but I've been told there's some type of pandemic going on, so you'll just have to settle for a sincere thank you. Please call 212-209-2950. Once again, 212-209-2950, or go to WBAI.org. You've been listening to Revolutions Per Minute on listener-sponsored WBAI in New York City. We're broadcasting at 99.5 FM and streaming on your favorite podcast app. To connect with us after the show, you can email us at revolutionsnyc@gmail.com. You can find us on our website, revolutionsperminute.simplecast.com, or on Twitter at NYC-RPM. And from all of us, let's hear a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Good night, everyone. And remember, abortion is a human right. We'll see you next week.